Back in 2001, a group of hikers discovered an incredible set of hand-carved steps leading deep into the mountains. The ancient-looking ladder was found near the village of Changle in East China. So the hikers couldn't have known what they'd find at the top, whether it be an ancient shrine, a monument, or a forgotten ruin. Moreover, the steps themselves are steep, and there are over 6,000 heavy hewn blocks. It would be easy to mistake them for a relic of a more primitive time. But when the hikers followed the ladder up, what they discovered was anything but primitive. What they discovered was a love story so profound, when it was reported in 2006, it was given China's award for the greatest love story of the year. At the top of the stairs, they found a 70-year-old Chinese man, Liu Guojiang, and his 80-year-old wife, Xu Chao-ching. Unbelievably, those steps hadn't been carved by some passing army or native tribe. All 6,000 plus had been carved by Liu himself with hand tools, so his wife could get up and down the mountain more easily. Carved whenever Liu wasn't busy struggling to farm and cook and harvest outside the cave he shared with his wife. Because not only had Liu carved the steps, he and his wife had been living alone, raising children since the 1950s, back when their relationship, for cultural reasons, was forbidden. So the two escaped into the mountains, where they built a home in seclusion, started a small farm, and where Liu would slowly carve his ladder, day by day, one block at a time, all in the name of love. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-dawn on the internet and get to the facts.
Back in 2018, marriage rates in the U.S. hit historic lows. From 10 wedding rings per 1,000 people down to 6.5. That's a 35% decrease for those of you keeping score. And according to the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, young people between the ages of 18 to 34 are having considerably less sex than they used to. Taking these two factors into account, it seems like love isn't in the air anymore. On the other hand, dating apps like Bumble and Tinder have seen surges as high as 25%. And while new couples may be waiting to meet in person until the pandemic is over, that hasn't kept them from falling in love from afar, either out of simple loneliness or from the existential crisis of being locked up for a year. So for our episode today, we want to tackle myths about lust and love, now that the world is learning to open its heart from behind closed doors. And we have 3 myths about love we want to bust. Myths like, myth 1, is it lust? Is it love? Is there even a difference chemically? And if it's all just hormones rampaging through our head, how do you stay in love after the initial attraction has faded? Myth 2, love is a complex human affair. Other creatures in nature might feel animal connection, but romantic love is a construct of the mind, correct? Myth 3, enough mushy stuff. Let's talk turkey. Single people or married people? Who wins big financially in the end? Is it safer for your bank account to stay single? Or do those tax breaks translate to big bucks in the long run? But first, I'm going to tell Joe about how Xu and Liu met, and why their love was forbidden in the first place. Well, here in the Re-Engineered You, we do narratives from all over the world. But our Japanese, Chinese, French is not very good. So on this one, I reached out to my good dear friend from Toastmasters, Angela Tanaka. She is a gifted public speaker, and she's just a brilliant woman. Born Chinese, married a Japanese man, and she helped me pronounce these names. She made a little audio clip. So I know I didn't do them perfect, but I did them a lot better than I would have. So thank you, Angela Tanaka.
And if anybody wants to correct our pronunciation, you can just go to our comments section and just drag us if you want. That might be a little bit easier. But we thank anybody that helps us with the research part of this.
And to stand up for myself, hey, I'm doing the best I can. Okay, give me a break. I barely speak English. Now, this love story started a long time ago. It started in the 1950s. 16-year-old Liu fell in love with a woman who was widowed, who was 10 years older than him. And this was a small village in the country in China. So at the time, Joe, this is not a thing. You don't marry an older woman. Men always married in that culture younger women with no kids, not 4 kids.
So it's totally taboo.
Absolutely. So this is like a Romeo and Juliet. This is another one of those stories that Joe has dug up that if you saw it in a book or a movie, you wouldn't believe it. I don't know why this isn't a movie, right?
It's, from what I could tell, it is very close to being one. Like it became big enough in China to where it's been. We're going to see a Netflix movie at some point about this.
Well, think about it. Shu here, she's got 4 kids, and she's after the younger man. I respect that, right?
Right. Yeah.
They're all cute when they're puppies, right?
I don't know if we have notes for this, but he was like doing her laundry and stuff. Like he was like, that's how he knew her, is he was doing her chores.
Well, you have another husband over here that does his laundry for his wife too. So I totally get it, because it's not going to get done if you don't start doing it.
Right. So forbidden love. That's a good place to start.
So they had escaped. They were chastised. They were scorned. The whole city the whole town, the whole village was gossiping about them. So they decided to get married and run away to the mountains.
Okay.
And they remained in seclusion. They went up there and formed a life off the grid, to the point where the people in the village just thought they had died and perished, had ran away, and they were gone. They never heard from them again. So they didn't look back.
Okay. Todd, if you were sort of like courting somebody in the 50s, don't you think it would have been easier to like go off grid and just go to another town?
Absolutely. They wouldn't find you. There's no social media. There's no social security numbers. There's no anything, right?
Right. My first thought isn't like, my first thought would be go to the next town over and just start again. My first thought wouldn't be let's go camping forever. Like, let's just
I see what you're saying.
go take
you mean
a
place
tent.
where there's actual resources and shelter?
Yeah, nobody can see us, but Todd is doing air quotes. But yeah, places that have amenities of any kind whatsoever.
Yeah, no.
This is how I know the guy was young when he tried to run off with her. Is his plan was go up into the mountain with a shovel.
Isn't it safe to say, though, that they have the same prejudices in that same village? The next village.
Yeah, that's true. They could just like make up different ages.
Yeah.
Like if you go to the next village and you're making up your name, you might as well be like, oh, by the way, I'm not 10 years younger. So this episode inception started with Todd and I were talking about how we know if we are in love or lust. Like is there a difference, and what can we tell? So why did you first sort of start looking into this?
You see in the relationships, and a lot of relationships we've been in, is it starts out hot and you have this attraction and everything they do is amazing, and it turns out after 6 months, a year or whatever, you have these shades on, it comes off, and then all the things you used to think you adored about them you don't find so interesting. And I think about love in different ways. I think of my family love, which we all need, and just like my camaraderie at work. You know, my friends, we might not tell each other we love each other,
right,
but we do. And then my romantic relationships. So what keeps people in love? How do they fall in love? What keeps them in love? And how do we make relationships last?
Because I am a Martian, I have to liken everything to movies. Have you seen 500 Days of Summer?
I have not.
Okay, there's a scene where Joseph Gordon-Levitt is like talking about how much he loves his girlfriend, and he's naming all these things that he loves about her, their quirks, like the way she does things, a spot she has on her. And then it completely reverses by the end of the movie. He's talking about everything, the exact same points, and how much he hates him. And that's what I thought about while writing this. Like, as we were going through this episode, I was like, okay, here's how it turns. Here's how we go from that initial obsession.
On that, too, I have a theory of, I think as humans, I think a very small percentage of people have gotten enough attention and love when they were little. And I don't know what you think. I'm just going to go out and say 2%, between 2% to 8% of people have really got what they needed as kids. The rest of us go seek it in romantic rate, in our friends, in whatever, drugs, alcohol, something. We go out and we seek it. I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, I'm just going to cheat and call back to one of our early episodes. We had dysfunctional relationships or toxic relationships. And in that episode, we talked about, it was an effect called the familiarity principle, the idea that we seek after subtle behaviors that our family possessed, and we seek those out in partners.
And they're not all good.
Right. But to your point, I seek out mall Santas even as an adult, and I tell them what I want for Christmas even in the off season. So that's how I cope with this.
Freaking Santa issues. Is that the same thing as daddy issues?
Right. Yeah. But I agree with you. I think that those 2% of you out there listening who got all the love you needed when you were young, I hate you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're jealous of you.
Todd and I aren't in that category, so we're going to talk about chemistry because that's the only way we can understand this.
You're called well-adjusted and successful.
Right. So we're going to start with a series. This is an article that I got from Harvard EDU. And this was also linked off to from a Medium article. So there is good research behind this to back it up. And this will be in our show notes. So go ahead and follow that link if you can. But would it surprise you that it's not just all one big, let's say a color palette smear of emotions that lead us from lust to attraction to attachment? There are actually clear stages. Clear with big quotes and big asterisks around it.
We can chart this.
We can chart this, yes.
You can watch a young couple or an old couple or a couple get together. And
Exactly. So would you like to chart this? Go through the 3 stages?
Yeah.
Okay, so Todd, today you and I, not with each other necessarily, but we're going to fall in lust and then attraction and then attachment. So we're going to fall in love today.
Okay, I already love you, but
I'm going to need you to wear a Santa
brotherly
uniform
love.
for this. So first
it's in no way romantic.
Right. And as we chart this, you can tell me which stage you think I'm at with you. So first we start with lust, and that's the one where we really want to sort of break down chemically what's happening and what's driving us. Now, from what I understand, lust is the Romeo and Juliet kind of effect. We mentioned that at the show at the start with our narrative. Liu and his aged spinster paramour, who is, how dare she be 10 years older than him at 26. But so when they first fell in lust, that's testosterone and estrogen. Todd, what's testosterone?
Testosterone is what makes a man a man.
Okay. I was going to explain it, but I realized that staring at you probably know more about testosterone than I do. So
I always wonder about this. Like, you see these two people and they get together, and it isn't just that they haven't even talked yet and they're already physically attracted to each other.
Right.
So I know that it's some kind of, there's something hormonal going there.
Oh, totally. I remember Cracked had an article about the Olympic villages and how the cleaning teams have a terrible time because they're just cleaning condoms off the roofs nonstop, like the Russian Olympic Village. Yeah, there is definitely something to hormone levels and initial attraction that is entirely driven by estrogen and testosterone. The way you can sort of, let's say, differentiate this as a phase, it's pure attraction. If you can look at people and you can tell that they have like nothing to bond over, no level of communication they're hitting on, If it is purely about, well, let's just go with the simplest term of this. Estrogen and testosterone come from the ovaries and testes.
Right.
Each gender has a measure of both. Men do have some estrogen in their system, otherwise they would die. Right. And some women have testosterone to a varying degree. Some of these manifest physically. If I remember correctly from human sexuality classes, a long jaw can be an indicator of testosterone in women too. There are finger lengths, things like that you can look up online. But generally speaking, those are the driving factors that will make you fall into lust, so to speak.
Is any of it to reproduce? Is any of it to start planting your seed?
900. Every part of this. The lust portion of this is entirely to reproduce.
It's not just sex for fun. It's for making babies.
Right, exactly. This is Olympic Village levels of making babies. This is you found somebody with attractive features to you. And we have episodes about attraction and about how we select mates. So those you can go back and look those up. We're not going to get too far into that. But yeah, stage 1, lust, is just testosterone and estrogen purely. Now, we're going to talk love and attraction. Todd, how would you define love?
I think of love as being romantic, somebody that you do thoughtful things for, someone more like a partner.
Okay.
You?
I define love as I'm gonna go with what I read a comedian say. Love in marriage is just two people pushing the garbage down until one of them dies and can't do it anymore. I think that after reading this, that's a partnership. Yes. What you said, doing things for the other person. I didn't really put this together until I had finished reading the research on it. But we'll sort of spoil this section of it. If you fall in love, you start dropping in serotonin. So we talk about hormone balances for each of these stages. Love and attraction is kind of unique in that you have an increase of dopamine, and dopamine is basically the feel-good drug. That's effectively what you get when you get high or drink. And you have norepinephrine, which is a stress hormone. It's the fight or flight hormone, basically. So you have a slight increase of that. But the most remarkable part to me is when you are in love, your serotonin goes down. So here's the divider for me. Serotonin is referred to as a happy chemical. It regulates mood. It regulates happiness and anxiety. When it goes down, you start seeing people with obsessive compulsive disorder.
Now, does that mean they get critical of their partner, or they start trying to get control of things, or how does that manifest?
It more manifests as obsessing about the other person.
Oh boy! Yeah.
And obsessing about behaviors and obsessing about how you can continue sort of a pattern that you're starting to set up. So when you start getting into love, you said doing things for the other person. Let's get into that a little bit. What are some things you did for Joanne?
Bring her food. Start her car for her, warm it up, scrape the ice off of it. Just trying to be thoughtful things.
Okay. So
the biggest one being listening to her every day for 30, 40 minutes when she gets home, kind of letting her empty the well without offering, as she calls, man-explaining or problem fixing.
That is that could be the title of our entire show. Is Todd and Joe mansplain simple things,
which I think is a sexist term.
Yeah,
it should be stricken from the thing. It's reverse sexism, in my opinion. But
don't let her listen to this episode. So that behavior, the seeking things out to help her day by day, and thinking about things that you could do to make her life a little bit easier, that could fall into this OCD sort of behavior. We're not saying that people in love are OCD, but the two share a similarity in that their serotonin has taken a dip. This obsessive behavior is also the sort of thing, like they have the whole phrase, the face that could launch 1,000 ships. Mm-hmm. This behavior, this phase of love, is basically why people can cross continents and do ridiculous things for love that alters the course of their life. The fun part about researching for this is reading about it and seeing that the behavior and the patterns that get set up during this stage, they don't share much with the first section. So like we talk about lust with testosterone and estrogen, that's purely mating. That's just coupling. The obsessive part doesn't actually kick in until attraction hits.
Okay, so is that stage 2 or is that stage 3?
That's stage 2.
Okay.
So lust is stage 1, attraction is stage 2, and that's where you start seeing the serotonin go down, and that's when you start seeing obsessive behavior hit in. So you can have like your scumbag roommate who is like a ladies' man, goes score every night, but when he like sells his motorcycle so he can be a safer driver for his girlfriend, that's when you start seeing this drop in serotonin, this obsession.
But what's throwing me off here, but I'm getting it now, is it the obsession. Anytime we think of it being an obsession, obsessions aren't always bad things, right?
Right, yeah.
We see them as that. Oh, you shouldn't be obsessed about anything, but we all obsess about. To get anything in life, including a relationship, you need to get obsessive. You need to get a little crazy, right?
That's exactly what we're looking at, yeah. When we use the phrase obsession, oftentimes we use it with a negative connotation. We're saying obsessed like, oh, stop obsessing over this thing. You're unhealthily obsessing. There is a healthy level of obsession, and it really very much has to do with these hormones. Now, there is a couple of phenomenons that happen during this phase. If you look at sort of like brain scans of people who've been married for a long time, they have less of these connections. So the love and attraction, when you start getting out of that phase, you get less obsession. So there's another way to put this. People who are starting to fall in love for the first time, they will normal out. Like if somebody is like the nice guy is being too nice, like he's obsessing and sending cards too often or liking everything on your Facebook page or whatever, they will normal out because the obsessive phase does not last forever. Eventually you do get into sort of long-term love.
That's called a business deal. Then it becomes more of a working relationship.
That's when you get into like, yeah. That's when you're trading sheep.
Sex. Then you do a lot of things for each other. You're very thoughtful. You're very doting. And then it gets on to the...
Right. Something I found also very interesting about this, in this article series, they talk about how biologically the reason for romantic love fading away might actually just be how our body responds to drugs. As cocaine users describe it, the brain adapts to excessive input of drugs, and it requires more and more to be high. If you are getting a dopamine fix and a serotonin drop from being in love, eventually your brain's just straight up going to adapt. So
I've lived this one many times because I've gone through long deserts of my life where I've been single and I've been just so painfully lonely that when I meet somebody, it's so exciting that I just can't contain myself. I overdo it.
Right.
And I know I'm doing it. My friend's telling me I'm doing it, but
Yeah.
I just can't help it because like you said, it's so exciting. The dopamine's just like, this is what I want. I've been lacking this for so long that I'm overcompensating, making up for lost time.
When that period fades, is it like coming off a drug? Is it like your brain is just adapted?
Yeah. And then you were just so on cloud 9, you weren't paying attention. I mean, you were just reckless.
Right. So do you want to talk about the final stage of love? How to maintain after that initial period? So I don't believe in when old people tell me, like old couples, that they're still in love and they're as in love as they were when they first met, and they're like they've been together 40 years.
Neither do I.
When I was first reading about this old Chinese couple who loved each other enough for him to carve stairs every day until he basically died. I didn't believe that. Like I was just like, he's doing it out of habit. He carving stairs is his way of getting out of the house.
I get sick of myself, Joe.
Yeah. Now this was they're arguing over tea, and he's like, I'm gonna go carve stairs, and then he just walks out, and then that's him for the day. So I kind of didn't believe so much that an older couple could be together for that long and still be in love. But this is where science and the article basically prove me wrong. So we've talked on the show about oxytocin. Oxytocin is also referred to as the love hormone or the cuddle hormone. It gets released when you have a lot of skin-to-skin contact, and this also something that this article mentions is vasopressin, which to put in the simplest terms, I can possibly get it because I am a layman. Vasopressin plus oxytocin means effective social regulation, social and emotional regulation.
Which means?
Which means don't ask too many questions about it. No, I'm kidding. I'm just going to focus on... okay, so I'm going to read straight from this article so I don't mess it up too badly. Vasopressin is associated with long-term monogamous relationships. Oxytocin and vasopressin overlap with the brain's reward system and deactivate brain regions associated with negative emotions. The difference in behaviors of these two hormones may explain why passionate love fades and attachment grows. So to put this in sort of an even shorter way, when you sort of fall out of lust and attachment, the thing that replaces it, and the reason why I think old people may not be as much of liars as I believe they are, chemically they have less of the obsession. Serotonin levels return to normal, so they're not like literally capital O obsessed anymore, and instead it is replaced with oxytocin, which is just this feel-good hormone. It's the love hormone. So all the other hormones fade, but that remains.
That's nice and smooth. And the earlier stage, the second stage, that could be a lot of jealousy when you're obsessed, and you kind of get over that, and then you guys are in a good place.
Right. That's a really good way of looking at it. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, with obsession comes jealousy and paranoia and thinking negative things. Now, they refer to this as the rustiness phenomenon, which I think is slightly insulting to old couples. But it is a scientific term. It means that couples get out of the habit of having sex and they can still be in love. So these old couples who are walking through the park and they're all sort of like, their gnarled, wrinkled old hands are twined together and they're just sort of bowed and kicking pigeons or whatever old people do. They may not be having sex, but they can still be in incredible amounts of love.
Yeah, I like that because you always think about that. If you're not having sex with them, you don't love them, and it doesn't true. You just love them in a different way.
Yes.
I also see when you go into that third stage of it, when you get over that obsession part of it, you love that person, you do things for that person, you're good partners, but you also maybe focus on your kids and you focus on your career and you get busy doing other things, and then you move the relationship along that way.
Right. Something that I wanted to know what the secret sauce was, like how they managed to keep that love going. And they talk about brain scans, and what you're saying is completely true, that they move that sort of like the social obligation that they share, they move it along. And eventually what they fall into is a system of habits where they get oxytocin from each other. So they have a system in place where they make physical contact with each other. Maybe they rub each other's shoulders in the mornings, or they hug, or they walk through the park holding hands. Whatever they do, they get oxytocin. And as this article said, they show the same intensity and activity in dopamine-rich areas in the brain as people who are married for decades can show the same dopamine levels as early stages of romantic love. So quite literally, when they say "we're as in love as we were when we first met," they mean it. Like they can actually have that happen in their brain,
just like on their honeymoon.
Yeah. So if you see that couple in the park, maybe get the hell out of their way.
You don't like old people too, kicking pigeons?
I just assume. I don't know what they're doing.
Oh boy, real nice guy.
I'm just cynical. That's all. So yeah, they're not lying. If you reach that attachment phase, so you go from lust to attraction and finally to attachment, and if you get a habit in place where you respect each other and you get regular boosts of oxytocin from each other through habit or contact, you can actually remain in love. And I think that's the takeaway for this section, hopefully.
Okay, Joe. So you like to rough it, right? You go camping. I mean, you're a man's man. You got a bow and arrow. I've seen you carrying it through the streets of Portland.
It's the only place I like to hunt.
What do you think about living in a cave? Does that sound like I mean, you saw the pictures of this. What did you think about the living conditions of this?
Romantic for the first week, hell for every day after that.
It's like a survival show. Now, when they went up there, now, Lou, our hero here, was only 19, and she was 29. They're living in a cave in a very remote area. There's no electricity. They didn't bring anything. They didn't have anything. There wasn't even any food. They were eating whatever they could off the land, which I guess was grass and bugs and roots. Kind of a tough start to a relationship, don't you think?
Yeah, that doesn't strike me as a well thought out, planned cave staycation. I don't know how that would work out, but
now I don't know how Lou made this, but he made for Shu a kerosene lamp. Now, I used to have these when I was a kid. I love the smell of them. It brings me back to when I was a kid. We used to heat up our little apartment in Maine with it. How do you make a kerosene? You just dip some kind of bark or something.
Anything that burns, linen, wick.
Yeah,
I think
it just keeps going like wax, right?
Right.
So, and that was like a big step up in their lifestyle. So it wasn't a big screen TV. It wasn't but what I think about is relationships are already hard. You're marrying a woman. She's got 4 kids. So you got all that, I guess we'd say micro stress or big time stress. I mean, this guy's got to be stepdad of the world.
Yeah, my stepdad worked construction, and he complained his ass off that he had to support a couple of kids that weren't his. Imagine this guy.
Yeah, stepdads remind you of that, right?
Yeah,
you're not my kid. I don't have to love you.
Yeah, he must have gotten home from carving steps every day and just been like, guess what I was doing? Steps again. What have you kids been doing?
One of the sweetest thing about this was life was hard, and Shu felt very guilty. And Lou never made her feel that way. And she used to ask him time and time, over and over, are you regretful?
Was his answer, are you kidding me?
No, Joe. He's a lot nicer than you.
Okay.
He said, of course not. I love you. I'd do anything for you. This is a quote that they had that Lou said. And he always replied with this when she would ask him if she was regretful. As long as we are industrious, life will improve. Industrious?
Industrious. Okay.
And I like that. Isn't that true, though? When things are tough, what do? We get working, we get busy, we get industrious.
Right.
Our life does get better.
We have an episode about toughness, and they talk about how the best way to think about it is to say the hardship is temporary, it's passing, and there's something you can do about it. So it looks like Lou kind of had that in mind.
And Shu, too. I mean, she's a tough woman to do this and sacrifice. And she must have really loved him to start a life with less opportunities and raise the kids and taught them how to farm and how to survive and raise 4 healthy kids.
Right. To look at a cave and be like, that sounds like a good idea.
All the kids talk glowingly years later about their parents. They talked about how they lived in seclusion for so many years. Now, what do we talk about? I always joke about this. Great relationships are relationships where the people don't spend too much time together, right?
Right.
Those are some of the best relationships because they get on your nerves. The kids bragged about how the parents never, in 50 years, 365 days a year, 50 years, never spent one day apart.
So I have a quick question for you, Todd. What is the longest pet you ever owned? Like what animal human relationship did you have the longest?
I had a beloved cat named Sarah. I had her for 18 years, and I loved that cat. And when she passed away, I was so traumatized. I took it harder than a lot of family members in my that had passed.
Okay.
That I cared for. What about you?
I've had a couple of cats. I had one that I really liked, Brock, who I had for I think 6 or 7 years, and I'm pretty sure it was stolen. But you're right. It is a deep love, and it is it's pretty pure.
You know what's funny is she was a real cuddly. She was like we call it a dog friendly cat. But the thing I missed most about her, I think, was feeding her every morning. When you do that every single morning for 18 years, I never was a art farmer, so that was something I just missed. I think maybe it's that vulnerability or having somebody need you, an animal even need you that bad.
Right. And that's not even to mention the dopamine and oxytocin you get from touching an animal like every other day. So we actually want to discuss if love is limited to humans, if we're the only creatures that feel deep love connections. Because I've heard some people, even more cynical than I, say that there's the cupboard mothered theory. And that comes from like the 40s. And it's the idea that animals don't actually love us. What they love is they love being fed. And that they will attach themselves to whoever is feeding them. So do you want to, okay, so first off, what's your theory on that? You think they're just like, they'll love you if you feed them?
Some of these labs look at you like that love in their eyes. Like, do you love me as much as I love you?
Right.
It seems so pure, but then I don't know. What do you think?
I think cats are evil, and they're pretending to love us for food. No, I think that some animals definitely can share. I
think it's separate. I think they do need that. They do but that's not. They have their own. They need their love and cuddle and attention too.
Yeah, that's well put. I think that anything that shares a limbic system like us, I think they have to be capable of it at least. And I think maybe our own instincts, we sort of blow them out of proportion as far as love goes because we have poetry and art. We think because we can make a movie out of it, maybe, we have a special type of love.
It's romanticized by love songs and movies we watch.
Exactly. Quite literally romanticized. So you said labs, like dogs? I think we should start with dogs. So I went looking for articles that talked about how animals feel love or how they demonstrate love and whether or not they share those hormones we were talking about at the start of the episode. Would you be surprised to know that dogs have been sort of scanned? Dogs throughout the history of modern science have been brutalized. I mean, like used in so many lab tests. We basically turn to them for anything we don't turn to rats for. But specifically in these tests, they're more modern, so it's not too bad. But we have scanned dogs, and we have looked at the hormone levels of dogs. And we have shown that dogs' brains do, in fact, light up almost the same as a human does when they are shown their owner. This comes from a New York Times article that it's called Dogs Love Evolution, which is a bit misleading. It sounds like it's implying that dogs love reading about evolution or that they love the act of evolution. Not quite. Have you ever seen videos of dogs adopting other animals?
Oh, yeah. When they fall in love with their whether it's a donkey or a chicken or something or another kitten, and they grow up together and they're best of friends for their whole lifetimes.
Right. And I've seen that with other animal pairings, but almost always it's like a dog and something else. It's very rarely a chimpanzee and a goose or something like that. It's almost always a dog is involved somehow.
The first thing that popped up when you were talking about this is, in my life I've had a lot of dogs that are from animal shelters, Humane Society, and those dogs that have been abused, who have been deserted, they are a lot more loving.
Right.
I think anybody would tell you that.
Yeah, they as a human who is anthropomorphizing, I interpret that as gratitude. I don't know if that's true, but they certainly are able to love other things and other masters.
And you get them and they're afraid, and sometimes they're even aggressive, but then as you spend time, as they get trust, I mean, the reason I bring it up is because what you're going with, it just seems almost like human.
Right. And they may be better at loving than humans are. So what we're getting to, and this sort of like the aha moment from this article, humans will pair off with other humans and form love and bonds. Dogs are uniquely able to do that with other species, which is something that almost nothing else on Earth can do. Like when you think about it, there's not a lot of evidence of like ancient man pairing up with an animal. I mean, like we have like White Fang and Call of the Wild, and like we have stories of animal, like other dogs and humans pairing up. But very rarely. It's not like a human and a gorilla went on to found a society somewhere. Dogs, on the other hand, if you raise a dog with goats, they will be sheepdogs. Like they'll be shepherds. You raise a dog around any other animal, they will eventually adopt that animal. Like they are uniquely suited to socializing, forming bonds with, and protecting other creatures. And that's something this study upheld. Like when they put dogs into functional MRIs, they found out that their brain lights up with the same reactions for love, or at least fondness, that humans feel for each other. Can I tell you about watching the ultimate trust fall from a dog?
Oh yeah, your weekend. Yeah, I've been waiting for this story.
So I went with my girlfriend to the gorge this weekend, and there is a big stone railing there, and it overlooks the east part of the Columbia Gorge. And there was this viewing area, and there is a wall that you can't see over. Like if you're a dog, it's above eye level. And there's no holes in it because it's made of, like mortared stones. And we watched this dog get out of a big pickup with a family, and the dog is excited. Like it's a young, I think it was like a boxer or something, and it's jumping around and it's clearly enjoying itself. And the owner is holding onto the rope, and he kind of motions at the stone wall, like the viewing area that they're all going to go look over. And the dog kind of looks at him like, okay, let's go. We're going this way. We're going. And then it followed his gaze, followed sort of where he was aiming the rope, and it just leapt over the wall.
Oh, did he stop it did he stop it by the neck?
Yes. It didn't have to, but it launched itself into literally the wild blue yonder. Like it could not have seen over this wall. The gorge is there, and it's just like wind is rushing past everybody. There was a very, very narrow strip of basically ground on the other side of this wall. The dog had found it. Like it hit the end of the rope, bounced back, and then was on this strip.
Can you imagine the kids would have been traumatized?
Oh my God. Yeah, and there were two of them. They had two kids in the back of this pickup.
And the owner probably didn't mean to. It was just the dog was excited and just bounced over the thing. Totally,
yeah. The dog just misinterpreted the owner's intent. The owner was, let's go look at this wall. The dog was like, yeah, let's go over it. But that, to me, like seeing that and reading this research, I'm like, yeah, dogs they're better than us. Like they're built to love on a level that we won't really get.
We don't trust our own parents with that.
Right, exactly.
We're skeptical of that. We see what screw ups they are. We're not going to jump over anything.
Yeah,
we take a look.
Yeah, we would want to look over the wall and then get a dissertation and a list of 10 items of why we should go over a wall. That it was instant, and I think most dogs are like that. That once they love and trust, that's it. Other animals are definitely capable of this level of love. You remember Coco the gorilla?
Yes.
Do you remember what her pet cat's name was?
No.
Coco the gorilla had several pet cats, but her first one before it was hit by a car was called All Ball, ALL-BALL. And apparently Coco liked rhymes, but she loved the gorilla so much. The gorilla loved her cat so much that when it got hit, she cried and she expressed, like, she used sign language to say she was sad, which is kind of incredible.
True grief. Real love, yeah.
Before you feel too sad about Coco losing her pet, Coco also blamed her pet cat on destroying a sink once. So Coco's
that's
also
just
capable
good
of
sibling
lying.
stuff,
Yeah.
though, right?
Right.
You're not gonna take a fall on that thing. The cat did it.
Yeah, I would love to be the handler who found that. Like when Coco is saying, like, there's a giant stone sink in her cage and it's destroyed, and Coco's like, the cat did it. I would love to be the handler in there, because the handler probably was just like, okay, Coco. I would have been like, all right, let's take it out on the cat. Like, all right, fine. You think the cat did it? We're punishing it. So we're going to very, very briefly treat humans in the same sort of study, the same sort of like series of studies. We want to treat humans as a mammal with a pattern that is about mating. How much are humans capable of love, and for how long are we built to love, so to speak?
Does it expire?
Yeah, does it expire? Is there a period of time that is like, did evolution set us up to love each other for a certain period of time? Because clearly from this research, dogs love indefinitely. And Coco the gorilla loved her cat basically until the cat died. Do we have a expiration date on love? Have you ever heard of the phrase the 7-year itch?
I have. We've done studies on it for the show.
That's right. We had that in toxic relationships.
When people start looking for another mate.
Yeah.
Or another job.
We are just very briefly going to mention that again. There is a Scientific American article called The Biological Basis for the 7-Year Itch. And in it, they talk about how only about 3% of mammals form monogamous bonds.
3%?
3%. Whereas a ton of birds do.
Yeah, I always think of penguins being the big one.
Yeah. Yeah, that... whenever I think about monogamous animals, penguins come up.
Ducks. I think of ducks. They're always in the couples swimming around together.
That's true. Are ducks monogamous, or are they?
Know.
Okay.
They're cheating on each other, you think?
In our children's books, they're monogamous, but yeah, the reason why I got this from Matt Ridley, who wrote The Red Queen's Race. One of the theories about why avian species are monogamous is because they have to sit on an egg until it hatches, and if they don't have a partner, then either they will starve or the chick will starve before it gets raised.
That's necessity. So
right. We are not ducks or penguins, but kind of humans fall into the same category.
Don't humans do that though? We're going to get divorced when the kids get out of school, kind of.
That's exactly right. A lot of the theory behind the 7-year itch is that we may not have eggs to sit on, but we definitely have kids that aren't capable of caring for themselves.
And we need to feed ourselves until we got to stick together, keep the tribe together financially.
Right. Horses don't necessarily need to be monogamous because, horses come out and they can basically walk already. And by the time they're old enough to like eat and graze on their own, they can run away from, wolves. We can't. We have a kid. That kid is effectively a human larva for 7 years.
We're the most vulnerable of all species, right? For the longest.
Right. Our brain has to develop the ability to be like, okay, now I make a spear because I'm in trouble. So that's a lot of science kind of backs up the idea that we are vulnerable for so long that it takes about 7 years to raise a kid. So that's about how long it is. And by the way, this is totally backed up by divorce statistics, that it's about a past toddler age, let's say, about 4 years before people start sort of breaking apart and losing bonds and thinking about divorce. So the 7-year itch, that may not be accurate completely, but the idea that we actually have a biological imperative to go start another kid, another seed, after 4 to 7 years, that actually kind of gets backed up by a little bit of stats and science. Now, we will point out, though, that in our narrative, Liu was not her first husband, so she had already had how many kids?
4 kids.
So that last bit about the 7-year itch, if she had experienced the 7-year itch, she already had 4 kids and she lived in a cave, so there wasn't a lot of going back to her old life after that.
Right. This is really showing a commitment, right?
Right, yeah. So if you don't want your partner to have a 7-year itch, a crisis or crisis of faith, take them up to a cave for 4 decades. Do you want to talk about how things went for them?
This is the thing. So Then this is the sad part. So they lived all these years. They shared this life together. 50 years, they didn't take a day apart from each other. One day, Liu comes home from work, farming, hard work, a daily work, climbs up the steps. He's 72 years old, and he collapses, and he passed away right at the foot of his wife in her arms. And they said she was so grief-stricken, she was so traumatized by this that they couldn't pry her hand out of his hand. So it's very sad. And this quote that she had that she was repeating over and over, because he was a younger man, and he had promised all his life that he would take care of her till the day he died. But so she planned on being older that she would die first. And this was the quote: "You'd promised me you'll take care of me. You'd always be with me until the day I died. Now you left before me. How am I going to live without you?" And it breaks your heart. She repeated this sentence over and over and over, days before the funeral, the whole week, crying the whole time, bawling the whole time.
Wow.
And 3 years later, October 30, 2012, she died, and I guess of a broken heart.
So their steps were discovered in 2006, which means we have 6 years between then and Zhu dying. So people had already sort of caught on to the love story, and then the last of the couple passed away. Does that mean people were... how many people showed up to the funeral? Not just 4 kids from the cave?
So you're absolutely right. So they lived in seclusion. They didn't have any friends. There was no social media. But they got a lot of press from when they discovered this amazing relic-looking. So people started to visit. People knew about it. So it got even more press when they passed away. So people started visiting first from local villages, and then they started visiting from all over the country because it was, it was supposed to be the country's greatest love story.
Okay. And they called it the Ladder of Love.
Yeah, I like that. Now, what happened after the funeral? They got this big send-off, which is funny because they were, banished from their place, and they lived in shame by their own, their own account. Mm-hmm. The local government decided to turn it into a tourism site. It kind of reminded me like the Hachiko Station.
Oh, right.
Tokyo. So it's a symbol of love in China. So all these people, they invested about 2.6 billion yen, which is about, in U.S. currency, roughly is 416 million, to build a tourism site for where this greatest love story took place.
Wow, that's awesome. That could have bought a much better hut than a cave.
If I ever visit there, I am going to go to the greatest love story.
Ditto, me too. You can't bring Joanne, though. Because if you bring her, like your wife, and then she sees those steps, what will you have to do that next week? So I made a joke about how much money the China's investment into their shrine could have actually bought them if they were still living. Do you want to talk a little bit about money in general for love and marriage and finances?
Yeah, I always think as soon as the money runs out, that's when divorce comes in, right?
Actually, yes. The number one reason for divorce usually given is financial. And I believe it's Time put out a poll about why young people aren't getting married. Also financial. Of the top 15 reasons why people aren't getting married or having kids, 7 of them were all financial.
Because they just can't afford it.
Right, exactly.
Their parents are still paying for a lot of their stuff where they live, their cell phone, their car. They can't afford it.
To quote old hack comedians, what, in this economy? But I don't even feel good about saying that, by the way. But I went looking for an article about who actually makes more money, singles or married couples, or an individual of a married couple who would make more in their lifetime. So how about you, Todd? Do you think you have made more money in your lifetime by getting married?
That's a tough one because, both sides of that are always complaining. When I was single, I spent all my money chasing women. And then when I'm married, you say, "Oh, I gave all my money to my wife. I'm married." I'm like, so
Right.
which one's right, Joe? I'm curious on this one.
There's also we have gone over stats about how married people or people in relationships live longer. Men specifically live longer when they're in a relationship. I assume that men make more money throughout their lifetime right up until their first heart attack or whatever.
I do think that when you're married, you can focus on work more. You can really, because you have somebody that you're accountable for. And that helps me. I know I've always made more money. I've been married twice now. And I've always made more money when I'm married, when I have somebody, giving me what I call much needed structure.
Okay. Somebody keeping you from buying another guitar?
I wish I'd spent it on things like that. That actually shows I waste money way more than that. Drinking, party, and other things. Worse habits than.
We're going to look at an article called "The High Price of Being Single in America." And that title, it's from The Atlantic. That title probably tells you where we're going with this. Did you know there are some countries that are trying to build new laws to incentivize marriage even more than they already are?
What do you get?
Well, like Singapore apparently has a really low what's called replacement rate. They don't have enough people getting married or having kids, so they're trying to give bigger and bigger financial incentives. Same thing with exactly tax breaks, even more tax breaks and incentives than what they already get. And it's because we, among most other first world nations, we're under replacement rate. Replacement rate is 2.1 or 2.3 kids or something like that. America, Japan, Singapore, like most first world nations are currently under replacement rate. They're losing people year by year. So if you wonder why we incentivize marriage, that's basically the nutshell of it. But for this article, a couple of the writers, and this is specifically for women, they were trying to figure out if a single woman would make more money in America throughout her lifetime than a married woman. I'm just going to leave the article in our links. We're not going to have time to walk through all of the math they did. They were very, very diligent about it, though. Like, I read through, and it was kind of funny. They made jokes about their own math and what they were figuring out. But it kind of comes down to a couple of major factors. They were looking at so if the married women's husbands worked as well, earning between $51,000 and $103,000, and they even took into effect that they the women in the marriage were earning 78 cents per dollar that their man earned. So they even sort of did like the unfairness math.
Mm-hmm. Men make more than women doing the same job.
Right. And they took their ages from 26 to 66, so they factored in retirement. So they really did quite a lot of diligence, and they found that with even the most conservative estimates, singles got screwed to the tune of, let's see if I can find the exact number they gave. So ultimately, when they factored in healthcare, taxes, and generally what's called the gender tax, it came out to be $1 million or more.
I totally get that. A lot of couples, like whoever has the better job, will be on that person's health care, so they don't pay that. So they don't have to pay that, and then you pay less taxes because you have a mortgage together. You're a married couple, so you get more tax breaks. Absolutely.
Right. When you go into your taxes and you check that box, single or married, that makes a difference.
But holy shit, $1 million is you're a millionaire. That's a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. What would you do if you won $1 million? Well, if you got married early, you already did. So that doesn't really help as a question that much. Financially,
but if you marry the wrong person, you lose a lot more than $1 million. Am I guessing?
Yes. We're not going to get into the cost of divorce. Anybody living in America knows it's insane.
With a gambling, drinking, drug problem.
Right. Yeah. We will say that if you're careful, you get married to the right person, you take your time, and you do the math properly, you'll make $1 million compared to a single. You can also lose that amount just by having one really sloppy divorce. So, in far less time too. You want to beat that 40-year average or whatever their math came out to be. Just get divorced. You'll be at that very quickly. We had a note in our subjects doc about arranged marriages, so I wanted to know about that too. So if we're talking about do singles win in the long run? What's better? Regular marriage for love, quote unquote, which is what they call it in India, or marriage for being in an arranged marriage. Who would you say would be happier, Todd?
I have a little bit of experience in this just because I have a lot of friends who are Indian and a lot of friends who are Korean, and there's in those two societies, Korean's not so much anymore, but there used to be a lot of arranged marriages, and I think that they're maybe more successful if you were going to do it by the average.
Really?
What about you?
I would have guessed love marriage. I would have thought that would have been the big winner. Like I would have guessed better happiness indexes, better financial scores, everything. I would have been very wrong, but
well, I think because your perception of your family, they look at the big picture. They look at 30 years from now. When you're young and you're in that lust thing, you just look at what's cute. You're not looking at what your parents and we've talked about in other podcasts where we're bad self-evaluators.
Yes, and I think you're right. I think arranged marriages look at a little bit farther ahead than that initial stage of love when we talk about testosterone and estrogen doing the driving for that initial lust stage. Arranged marriage is basically as a way to put in a system that is designed to jump over that, to get you to the next stage. From India, this comes from a Psychology Today article. It has been reported that about 90% of marriages in India are arranged. By the way, if you ever want to hear hilarious comedy...
90%?
Yeah. Not that part. Yes, about 90%, according to Psychology Today. But one of my favorite things on earth is watching Indian comedians joke about arranged marriages, because they will haze each other. Like people who had to get married without having an arranged marriage, they will make fun of their male friends who had arranged marriage. Like they didn't have to do work. They're like, you didn't have to learn how to date. You just got your aunt to arrange it for you. So
that'd be nice
a lot of fun.
Just to bring them to you.
Yeah.
Just sign here, use some paperwork out.
Right.
How awkward is that? Right? Staring at each other.
So you had a family member who was willing to arrange this too. We have so much in common. 74% of young Indians said that they prefer, 18 to 35, according to this, prefer an arranged marriage over a love marriage. And divorce rates are higher in love marriages as compared to in arranged marriages. Now, also, it says in this article that India has a very low divorce rate, only about 1.1%. However, I'm not going to take that to heart. I mean, even though this was in the Psychology Today article, I'm going to assume that's going to also factor in how taboo it is in certain regions, how class plays into it, how law plays into it.
Family pressure.
Right.
Social pressure. And I think Americans, I speak for everyone as an American, that we think that even if the numbers are this and that, I'd rather go hunt on my own, and I'm going to be the one that doesn't get divorced.
Right, exactly. So we're going to all of that is good as far as like stats on arranged marriages. We're just not going to dive into how why the divorce rate is so crazy low. We'll sort of leave that to statisticians to figure out.
Lust is testosterone and estrogen. Attraction is dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. And attachment is oxytocin and vasopressin. And if that sounds like an oversimplification to a process that gets blurry, frantic, and wild, it very much is. Just remember, the late stages of love can last, and they can be glorious as long as you dedicate time to each other to make plenty of that sweet, sweet oxytocin with one another. Love is not the sole domain of humans. Other animals form mating pairs, bond, and learn to love, even across species. But the human habit of long-term partnering, even after rearing children, might be uniquely Homo sapien. It might also explain the origins of the 7-year itch, or more accurately, the 4-year itch. Love, or at least marriage, makes good financial sense in the U.S. That is, if you've been very careful in selecting your spouse. Because while marriage can hypothetically save you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of decades, divorce can cost you that in just months. The next time you're wondering if the excitement you feel is just lust, or maybe it's love after all, ask yourself this. Would you risk setting your house on fire on a flip of a coin? Because apparently, we would. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have our research links, show notes, and blog articles for each episode. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debate.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.